The New Jersey Bank Marketing Association presents Forecast 2010, a series of conversations with New Jersey's bank leaders about their outlook for the coming year. I'm your host, Steve Lubetkin. In this segment, Paul Napoli, the retired vice chairman of U.S. Trust Corporation, with his outlook for the year 2010. Now let's go to the lectern for Jane Gore of Amboy Bank, who will introduce Mr. Napoli.
Our next speaker is Paul Napoli, who's the retired vice chairman of U.S. Trust Corporation. He is a professional in investment management with more than 40 years of experience in wealth management. He understands the needs and concerns of the affluent as well as the issues affecting the wealth industry. Before joining U.S. Trust in 1983, Mr. Napoli was vice president and portfolio manager at the Bank of New York for 11 years. He is a member of the New York Society of Security Analysts and the Association for Investment Management and Research. He also serves on the Rockefeller University Trust and Estate Council and is a financial advisor to St. Peter's Prep and St. Benedict's Prep. He is on the advisory board of the Salvation Army, and he is a chartered financial analyst and a certified trust and financial advisor. He received his BA from Boston College and his MBA from Columbia. And help me welcome Paul Napoli. Thank you.
I was born an optimist, grew up an optimist, and boy, it's tough to be an optimist.
It is.
The good news was my timing in retirement was excellent. I didn't work the last year. I could really watch this from the outside, and it's a lot more fun when I talk to my colleagues to watch it from the outside as opposed to the inside. So what I hope to share with you today is, first of all, how did we get in this awful mess that we're in? It didn't happen overnight. It took time, and it really started back in 1994. As you probably are aware, over long periods of time, about 60% of households have owned a home, or a condo, or something. And President Clinton set a goal to, quote, increase home ownership among the poor, particularly amongst blacks and Hispanics. And that was the footings for all of this to start to happen. Government trying to do a good thing. Government trying to help people and improve their lives. Well, HUD got some new powers, and they hired a bunch of people to make sure the banks are doing a good job. CRA was very much enforced, and a bunch of auditors and lawyers were hired to make sure that the banks were really complying. Banks were encouraged to lower their credit standards. Sometimes there were no down payments or a 3% down payment. And at the peak of the lunacy, there were some banks in California lending 110% the value, because the prices are just going to keep going up and up and up. Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac went along with the game. They were encouraged to be supportive of all this was going on. And as a matter of fact, they had a target of 42% of new loans were to be with families with below median income levels. So you can see this crescendo, this wave building. And of course, along with that came a AAA rating. Then came securitization of subprime loans with AAA ratings. Somehow or other, that's an oxymoron, but that actually happened. Then we had credit default swaps, a new kind of insurance. And Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac leveraged up at the peak of 70 times equity. Banks were around 10 times. Lehman was about 30 times. And so we had these two government-supported agencies leveraged at many, many more times than anything else. The taxpayers have had to put about $120 billion into Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, and estimates are another $200 to $300 billion will flow to them before the mess is over. Again, government trying to make policy to do a good thing and creating a series of waves that just made it a mess. Of course, we're all guilty too. You remember from your economics course the wealth effect. The more you think you're worth, the more you spend. The more you're willing to maybe buy a second house or go on a vacation that perhaps you wouldn't if you didn't think you were worth so much money. And at the end of 1999, the household net worth for everyone in this country was $66 trillion. In September of this year, it was $52 trillion. So you can see housing values were going up, the stock market was going up, everyone was happy, very low unemployment, and we all spent money on credit cards, second houses, and a bunch of things that perhaps in hindsight we should not have done. I'm sorry if you can't read this in the back, so I'll just read it. These are household liabilities as a percentage of disposable income. In 1990, it was 90%. 2000, 100. 2008, in October, it got up to 138% of household income. People are shocked, so they've started to save. And you're going to see this number come back down. But it's going to have a powerful impact on what the consumer spends versus what the consumer saves. And then, of course, there's the old greed. Greed always gets us in trouble. Banks wanted to grow. Mortgage brokers wanted to make mortgages. Rating agencies wanted to rate things and make money. Wall Street was right there with every kind of complicated financial asset and product that you could come up with. And we were out there condo flipping and doing all sorts of other things. You add the three together, and we've had an awful, awful last 12 months. Again, starting with government trying to do something good to help people. So let's look at, again, going back to your economics book, how do we get to a forecast for next year? Well, as you all know, the consumer is about 2/3 of the economy. As we've just seen from this, the consumer is over-leveraged. There's actually been a net reduction in credit card debt, which is the first time that's happened in a long, long time. People are saving. Last month, the number was 6%. And we haven't seen a number like that in a long, long time. There's high unemployment, 10% plus. And I think most economists think that if you include those people who have run out of unemployment and have basically given up looking for a job, I've seen estimates of 15, 16%. So 1 out of every 6 wage earners doesn't have a job. And by the way, in the quarter of next year, 1.3 million people will run out of unemployment benefits. So making things perhaps even worse. The consumer isn't very confident. The University of Michigan survey, in January of 2007, it was just about 100. In September of 2009, it was 70. So we have a lot of unemployed people. Businesses aren't really hiring. The consumer is over-leveraged. They've got too much debt. 25% of homeowners are upside down on their mortgages. And this is a very difficult environment. Usually the consumer leads the economic recovery. And since they are 2/3 of the economy, it's important that they play their role. So one of the things I think we're going to come to a easy conclusion with is that it's going to take a while for the consumer to heal and to lead any recovery. Business is in much better shape, actually. Businesses are in business to make money. And so if they can't grow their top lines, they cut costs. And that, of course, is part of what's happened here. But they've also regained access to the financial markets. Remember, there was a kind of a freeze on commercial paper, and that's opened up. That market is booming as it has in the past. Balance sheets and earnings are all improving. Companies have healed themselves. There's more corporate cash as a percentage of assets on balance sheets than at any time in the last 20 years. There hasn't been much capital spending. That can be good for the future. Inventories are low versus assets. Again, that can be good for the future. And 25% of the profits of the Standard & Poor's 500 companies come from abroad. So a lower dollar coupled with other economies growing at a faster pace than ours are all good for business. We also see a lot of merger and acquisition activity, which I think is very positive. Kraft and Cadbury, AXA and ASA Insurance, Blackstone and Birdseye, Oracle and Sun, Hewlett-Packard and 3Com. These are all companies trying to build into larger entities and have the financial health to do so. And then, of course, there's the third component, government spending. I believe next year is a big election year. Money will be spent to help the economy along. Government's actually doing what they should do in this environment, which is to print money and try and stimulate the economy. Unfortunately, most of the money that's been spent was put in place just to stabilize the economy. Financial service firms, insurance, banks, auto industry. So it didn't help grow the economy. It didn't help create jobs. It was just there for stabilization. And then you have the $787 billion stimulus plan, but unfortunately only about 25% of that has been spent. And they're now talking about a possible second stimulus plan. Let's get the first one working and spent, and let's do some things that are good for the economy and create jobs. But I don't think you have to worry about the government not spending money next year. So we have a weak consumer. We have businesses which are in pretty good shape and are healed, and we have a government willing to spend money. So what's the outcome? Well, usually what happens when you have a very severe recession is you get a trampoline effect. You get a sharp bounce up. Those are called V recoveries. Sometimes you have a W, which is what some economists are forecasting for next year, which is a sharp drop, a modest recovery, and then a fall off again. I don't believe that's going to happen. I think what we're going to have is one of those cup and saucer ones where you have a sharp drop and then it's just bottoming out, and starting to climb at a very, very slow pace. I saw last week in the Wall Street Journal, and I think my forecast wouldn't be any better than this, but this was a survey of 100 of the top economists in the U.S. They don't think interest rates will go up until the fourth quarter of next year. They think everything will be done to keep rates low to stimulate some borrowing. Unemployment won't change very much, 9.5% to 10% by the end of next year. GDP, 2.5% to 3%, which is, given the severity of the recession, that number really ought to be 6% if these were normal. And inflation will still stay low at 1 to 1.5%. And if you look at treasuries, the tips, they're at about 1.5%. So there's a pretty comfortable feeling that we're not going to be faced with a lot of inflation. There are some positives. And as I said before, low inventories, very little capital spending, those are going to start to happen. World economies are going to grow. Our low dollar will help us export more. Maybe more people will come here and travel and go on vacation. If the stock market, which is usually a pretty good predictor of the future, is right, we're going to have a better year next year. Low interest rates, and then again, we have an election year. So that's how we got in the mess. That's a brief outlook for the components of how we're going to work our way out of the mess. But I really wanted to spend some time today on things that I really worry about in the long term. You'll see the word government in a lot of them. Our national debt in 2007 was $7 trillion. By the end of this year, it will be $11 trillion. In 2019, If we use the president's 10-year plan, which was filed earlier this year, it will be $23+ trillion. And by the way, the 10-year plan was titled A New Era of Fiscal Responsibility, Renewing America's Promise. I don't know, I guess we're going to promise to pay more money back to more people or something like that. Debt as a percentage of GDP in 1980 was 30%. 1990 it was 40%. 2008, 90%. 2012, using the plan that's in place, 100%. I did a little research to try and find some other countries where debt was 100% of GDP. And the first one on the list was Zimbabwe, Jamaica, Lebanon, Japan, and Italy. And there's more of them, but I think there's a flavor there for where we're going. In addition to ending up with all this debt, I saw a quote from David Walker, who's the retired head of the Government Accountability Office. There's $56 trillion in unfunded future liabilities for all government programs. $56 trillion. That's almost $500,000 a household in the United States. So that's not a good direction to be going, and we should very much worry about that. Is government good at running businesses? Well, the post office was founded in 1775, and they still can't figure a way to break even. Social Security has been in business since 1935, and they're basically going broke. Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, we just talked about those two. We're going to probably put $300 to $400 billion of our taxes into those to keep them afloat. Medicare and Medicaid, 44 years, and those will soon be broke. Amtrak, billions of dollars out the door every year. The war on poverty, which was put in place in 1964, 45 years, $1 trillion will be spent of our tax dollars on these programs this year. And certainly poverty levels are higher today than they were 44 years ago. One of my favorites is the Department of Energy, 1977, founded for the specific purpose to lessen our dependence on foreign oil. We import more oil today than we ever have before. The DOE has 116,000 employees and a $24 billion budget. And now we're going to take over healthcare. Scares the heck out of me. Taxes, they're going up. I think I could almost stop there. I think that's pretty obvious. What's happened is at the federal level, actually, taxes have been pretty stable and lower over a period of time. The Bush tax cuts expire, as you know, in 2011. But what's happened is, while those have been stabilizing, state and local taxes have been going up at an alarming pace. In 1990, state and local taxes were 7% of GDP. This year, they're going to be over 12% of GDP. And they keep coming up with new taxes or reducing things that you can write off on your tax return. Sales tax, cigarette tax, liquor tax, cable tax, phone tax, hotel taxes, maybe a value-added tax or a national sales tax. It's going to be pretty hard not to pay out more than half of what you earn, given all these taxes. I heard on the news last night they're now talking about a war tax, but they'd only charge it to people that were over a certain income level. And that's just not helpful in growing an economy. During one of the breaks, we were talking about why people move out of New Jersey and New York and Connecticut. Well, they're three of the highest tax rate states in the nation. People want to go someplace. You know, tax policy does influence behavior. And that's why people move and retire to places that are perhaps a little more warm, a few more golf courses, and have much lower income taxes and estate taxes. So I'm very, very concerned about the continuing, let's pick on the rich. When I worked at U.S. Trust, we used to do an affluent survey, and I think there's a misperception in the marketplace. We surveyed millionaires, and we surveyed the top 1% and 2% of affluence in this country. 90% of them made that money on their own, either through a small business, through savings, through investment, through their work. So, the generation of people that are creating wealth in this country didn't get it from daddy or mommy, they earned it. And anything we do, I think, to destroy that incentive to work hard, to save and invest and create a better life is just a very, very negative long-term issue. Geopolitical issues. I'm very concerned about the dollar. We've seen what's happened to gold this year. It's gone up in a very dramatic way. As you know, the dollar is 60% of world government reserves, has been for a long time. But in 2008, 63% of world reserves, new money going to reserves, primarily euro, yen, and others, went into euro, yen, and others, and not the U.S. dollar. So there's an erosion of value in the dollar by countries holding them as their reserves. And the frightening thing to me is China, who is the primary buyer of our treasury debt, only has 2% of their reserves in gold. Basically, the rest is almost all in dollars. Well, what if they decide to take their new cash and buy gold or buy euros or buy yen and not buy dollars and keep dollars? That would have a devastating economic impact. Inflation would go up a lot, and the value of the dollar would go down a lot. We also have the Copenhagen meeting, which is coming up. And apparently, we as a country have agreed to the principles of it, the general principles of it, which is the richer developed countries should pay money to the emerging market countries for the mess that we've created in the air, and at the same time limit what we do so that they can grow faster and emit more pollutants, but the world will come out even. That's just frightening to me, that we would be willing to do something like that. And the last thing I want to talk about is class warfare. The rich have been taking a battering here the last few years. Not everybody is a greedy Wall Street banker. And 40% of U.S. households in 2007 paid no federal income taxes. 40%. You know what the number was in 1980? 20%. We are becoming a dependent society on government to give us things. Some of those social programs I mentioned before, $1 trillion. And by the way, guess what the top 10% of taxpayers pay? They pay 40% of all the taxes. So people are paying taxes, and we are slowly but surely creating a dependent society. So in the short run, I don't look for another collapse. I think we'll have a very slow recovery. The consumer needs time to heal. Business is doing well. Government will spend money to keep us going, especially in an election year. But I hope as you walk away from this, and no, I don't work for the Fox network, by the way. I've been accused of that by some people. But these are serious issues. These are not frivolous issues that we as a country need to deal with. And government seems to stick its nose, everything government sticks its nose in the last 20 years or so, 30 years or so. I guess Guns and Butter with Lyndon Johnson was the start of it all. Hasn't worked out real well. So I do worry about those long-term things. I hope we have people in Washington that can change what's going on today. Behavior, both within the political system and within the financial system, and so that our children and grandchildren don't spit on our graves and say, what the hell did they do to us? Anyway, thank you very much. By the way, just take 1 minute to read this. I'd like to leave. You cannot help the poor by destroying the rich. You cannot strengthen the weak by weakening the strong. You cannot bring about prosperity by discouraging thrift. You cannot lift the wage earner up by pulling the wage payer down. You cannot build character and courage by taking away people's initiative and independence. You cannot help people permanently by doing for them what they could do and should do for themselves. And again, that wasn't by Fox, that was by Abraham Lincoln.
Your long-term view kind of described where New Jersey is today. I wondered if you could comment on New Jersey's economic woes.
What's going on in New Jersey? And I think New Jersey, unfortunately, is guilty on almost all of those counts. And I think we will continue to see an outflux of people from the state and an outflux of businesses from the state if something isn't done in training. Taxes, the environment to operate a business, I think are all things that influence behavior. And New Jersey's estate tax, we have all the baby boomers, is one of the highest in the country. Why not go someplace where there isn't an estate tax? Why not pass that money on to your kids and your grandkids as opposed to the state of New Jersey, which hasn't run itself as a business very well? So I'm very concerned. Is it the end of the world? No. Are we the worst? Certainly not. There's a lot of states in much more severe trouble than we are. But what I read in the papers about, unfunded pension liabilities. Corzine floated the, let's sell the turnpike and, the Garden State Park. I mean, some of these things are really, really extreme. And basically, the solution is simple. Government can't do all the things that it does today, and no one seems willing to deal with that. So I am worried about the future of New Jersey, creating new business, creating wealth, and attracting business and individuals to live in the state. Thank you.
Come up. Tom, you come up.
We hope you enjoyed this presentation from the New Jersey Bank Marketing Association. For more information, visit njbankmarketing.com. We produce these programs in the studios of Professional Podcasts in Cherry Hill, New Jersey. On the web at professionalpodcasts.com. This is Steve Lubetkin. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you out there on the net. Take good care.